Thank you, Mr Speaker. Standing here tonight at this hour reminds me of when the original bill was first introduced. I was then the Fisheries Advisor to the Federal Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, and I recall spending many hours working with the then Environment Minister's office, the Senator, the Honourable Robert Hill, in ensuring that the original Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act was thoroughly considered given its reach, and we spent a lot of time engaging with stakeholders to ensure that the bill, people had the opportunity to provide comments on the bill to ensure that it was robust and that it took into account its impacts. And I feel disappointed, at the very least, that a bill of this nature, indeed 7 bills, that can and will have a profound impact on industry, on our efforts to protect the environment, are being rushed through this place before Christmas. Indeed, last night in the Federation Chamber on the Freedom of Information bill, I spoke about social licence. And social licence isn't earned when you do what people expect you to do. You earn social licence when you do more than the public expects you to do. Well, what we're facing here tonight is a government doing far less than the public expects them to do. This is an important piece of legislation. My constituents deserve the right to have an opportunity to provide me with feedback. That hasn't been given the time frame that we've been presented with this legislation. Indeed, 700 pages relating to the bill and an equivalent 700 pages for the explanatory memorandum. But here we are. Here we are at this late hour, and here we are trying to work our way through what is complex reform. And indeed, the member for New England earlier this evening made a comment that we do face a dilemma, and a serious one at that, because we on this side do support sensible environmental reform. But we're being asked to negotiate a bill with many flaws, and we need to find a way through this, because if we don't find a way to negotiate a better outcome, we will end up with a bill being negotiated between the government and the Greens, and that is a far worse outcome. So I certainly appreciate the challenge and scope the government is confronted with in reforming national environmental laws, and I appreciate the work that they've done. I just wish they had given us all Australians, more time to consider these pieces of legislation. Indeed, in my very first speech in this place, I made what I feel, a common-sense statement, an important one, is that government does not do business better. Canberra does not do business better. Yet, embedded in the reforms, in the logic behind the reforms, is a sense that Canberra can do business better by directing farmers and industry to adhere to a rules-based system when it comes to the environment. And we've heard again from the member of New England the impact of taking away farmers' property rights. Again, I just come back to it is so important when we are dealing with legislation that can impact somebody's property right, somebody's much-loved farm, the earth that they toil day after day. If we're going to impact their capacity to do their business, we need to take our time and to seriously think about the consequences. So, Mr Speaker, I fear that the government is going to burden Australia with sweeping reform of environmental legislation, regulations, prescriptions, processes and penalties that the hard-working people of this country will regret and will reject. There are 7 Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act bills in this package, and the government will only allow the bills to be considered as one. This means that the issues within 1,459-page package cannot be adequately scrutinised or addressed. That such a sweeping set of reforms that will impact millions of people, our industries, our businesses, our fiscal health and our sovereignty is being managed in this way is, in my view, reprehensible and debases its proponents. This is not the right way to develop and enact legislation. It is not reasonable to expect the legislators to have to deal with it in this way, and it is an affront to the people of Australia that they will end up with what the government wants, not as what is best for the country, not what is in the national interest. The list of what is wrong with this bill is long. Let's start with the proposed Environmental Protection Authority. Besides the fact that it is a duplication of what many of the states already have in place, there are many questions about its functions, costs, structure, powers, accountability and transparency. On its powers, there needs to be measures put in place to prevent this new national EPA body from behaving like the New South Wales version, which dominates and controls other departments, manipulates bureaucratic processes for personal agendas and undermines important industries to the people of the Lion electorate, like the forestry industry, at every possible step. We simply cannot have that sort of rogue operation at the federal level. For the sake of our farm sector and for our mining, coal, gas and oil industries and for what's left of our forestry industry. There must be proper processes put in place to prevent that and explicitly deliver true transparency and accountability. There must be scope for the parliament to review EPA operations through a committee. There must be a mechanism to review orders issued by the EPA, and the organisation must table an annual report to parliament. Very importantly, it cannot be the regulator and the policeman at the same time. But the current bill has the EPA function of assessment, compliance and enforcement. And Professor Samuel recommended limiting the EPA to compliance and enforcement, with the assessment function to be retained in the department. Now, in regards to the review of operations, the CEO of the proposed EPA does not report to the minister. The CEO must be accountable to an elected minister. The bill says the CEO must be independent. The policy behind this is understandable, but any accountability is only made in 10 yearly reviews. The bill is missing the requirement for a CEO's statement of expectation to be issued, for it to be binding and for the minister to have the ability to terminate the CEO for failure to perform to the statement of expectations. So the parliament should have some form of review mechanism between periods of statutory review. This should not impinge the policy of independence, but rather enhance administrative accountability. A review mechanism through a parliamentary committee will ensure that decisions are safeguarded from bias. The EPA, with powers including the ability to stop work orders and to audit approval holders to ensure they are compliant, must have a process to externally review those orders. This mechanism must be included in the bill because the power to issue stop work is a very significant power, a power held by unelected officials and with the consequence of cruelling development and economic activity in communities like mine. In terms of the annual report, the bill does not require the annual report to be tabled in the parliament, but the bill needs to set out what must be in the annual report. Now is the time to get this right. The biggest issue facing Australia today and tomorrow is productivity, and if this is truly one of the government's objectives, then an explicit review and reporting process is a key aspect to ensure transparency and accountability. Now, the other aspects of the bill that cannot be accepted in their current form and that need to change include the unacceptable impact definitions, and these will significantly constrain development. Industry has proposed that the definition needs to be removed from the legislation into standards, with some further adjustments in the standards. Currently, there are 37 definitions covering 8 pages defining unacceptable impacts, resulting in limiting the number of projects that would be possible. A number of current projects would not have been granted an approval under the proposed reform. On Scope 1 and Scope 2 reporting, these must be removed. The reform proposes applications are required to include Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. This is a slippery slope to a climate trigger. Further, it is also concerning that the legislation does not explicitly state the information cannot be used for decision-making and that it cannot be used for applying conditions. The concern is that this will form grounds for green litigation. In terms of existing streamlined pathways, we agree these must stay. This would be in addition to the proposed new streamlined pathways. That way, if a project doesn't fall into the new streamlined pathways, which focus on upfront paperwork, that a proponent will still be able to access streamlining further into the process that the government would otherwise have removed. I want to now speak on fines for non-compliance and that the need for these to be proportionate. The proposed reforms have provision for up to $825 million in fines. However, these must be made proportionate and an appeals mechanism must be available. There also needs to be strong guardrails in determining fines. And the net gain definition must have clarity and certainty. At present, the concept is unwieldy and the justification for such provisions unclear. There are significant positions currently in the reforms which the Coalition support and must remain. They include ministerial decision-making to remain with the federal minister, that there be no climate trigger, and very importantly for the Line electorate, that forestry under the regional forest agreements remain exempt. Any adjustment to the current arrangements must ensure that the native forestry industry remains viable and not worse off. However, regarding native hardwood forestry, the minister has said on the ABC in an interview with David Spears that, I quote, "What we have said is that we will follow the recommendations from Graham Samuel to apply national environmental standards to the regional forestry agreements, which means in practice that native forestry would need to meet higher environmental standards than are currently required under the legislation. This is dumbfounding. The regulatory regime that Australian foresters, particularly those in New South Wales, operate under are among the tightest, toughest and most prescriptive in the world. It is impossible to imagine how they could be any higher, let alone why anyone would want them any higher. For instance, in New South Wales, it was made illegal in 2000 to harvest timber from what was loosely and very subjectively called old-growth forests, and clear felling is also prohibited. The minister went on to say that some of those standards will be coming in the next couple of days, even though they can't be created until after the bill is passed, which all means that the industry is to get new, higher standards that it won't see until after this bill has passed. How can business operate under this scenario? How can operational and investment decisions be made when they don't know what's coming? How on earth can that assist or boost national productivity? Where is the national interest? Between this Albanese government and the New South Wales Minns government, the real question for them about hardwood timber is how long do you think, we can have before we run out of timber and we have to import it all, with the consequence of exporting our timber jobs? Mr. Speaker, we are missing a great opportunity here, and that is to remove the prohibition on nuclear energy. The ban was created in 1998 by the Howard government as part of a deal with the Greens to establish a new reactor at Lucas Heights. At the time, the prohibition was a low-value trade-off. Then the need for nuclear was not great. With a country full of coal, energy was affordable and abundant. Not so now. With energy prices soaring, which is of course having a knock-on effect on pretty much everything, the need for nuclear, energy-dense, zero-emissions nuclear, coupled with a variety of other energy systems, including gas, coal and renewables is required.